Hi, this is Adam Law once again. Today's video is about the holidays of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. After the holiday of Sukkah, which is culminating the holiday season, from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, we have the holiday of Sukkah from the 15th through a week in the month of Tishrei. After that, there's the 8th day, a very mysterious holiday called Shmini Atzeres, the 8th of stopping. What is it all about? Let's look a little bit first at the verses in the Torah to learn and see what it says. In Parshas Emor, in Kaf Gimel, it says, God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of the 7th month is the festival of Sukkah, a 7-day period for Hashem. On the first day is a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. For a 7-day period, you must offer a firing offering to God. On the 8th day, there should be a holy convocation for you, and you shall offer a fire offering to God. It is assembly. You shall not do any laborious work." So we see here that it talks about the 8th day also being a day like the first day of Shmini Atzeres. It's a holiday in itself. As a matter of fact, the Gemara says, even though there are 3 festivals, Passover, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, nevertheless, Shmini Atzeres is sort of like the 4th/not 4th holiday. It's appended to the end of Sukkot, and even though there's 3 festivals, it also itself is considered a holiday. Now in the diaspora, it even extends out even further to a 2-day holiday, and that's where the idea of Simchas Torah comes from. And that the fact is that in Eretz Yisrael, where we only keep 1 day of Shmini Atzeres, that day is the same thing as Simchas Torah. But in Chutz La'aretz, in the diaspora, it's really 2 separate days. Shmini Atzeres, and then a second day, which is part of Shmini Atzeres, but a second day of it, like all the holidays in the diaspora are 2 days. And we celebrate the Simchas Torah celebrations specifically on that last day, which would really be sort of the 9th day of the Sukkot festival, a long festival. So the other place that we find Shmini Atzeres is written explicitly in the Parsha Pinchas, where it speaks a lot about the different holidays. So let's look there. Now, all the holidays are in order in Parshas Pinchas, from Passover through Shmini Atzeres. Of course, Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh are first, but then when they start the actual holiday season, which is a 6-month period from Passover to Shmini Atzeres, starts with Passover. And Shmini Atzeres is the last thing. What's very unique about the Sukkot holiday, which is right before Shmini Atzeres, where we're dwelling in booths and taking the 4 species, is that there's these offerings in the temple. It starts with 13 bulls and 14 lambs. And then it also goes on and says 2 rams. And then it goes on and it says 1 male goat. And then the regular offerings of the day, the tamid offering. Each day has the same amount of animals, meaning it has 14 male lambs on each day, as well as the goats for sin offering and the continual offering. But each day goes down. It starts with 13 bulls on the first day, it goes to 12 on the second day, and it goes down each one of the days. But all the other offerings are the same. And the total bulls that are offered over Sukkot equals 70. So Shmini Atzeres is at the end of the story of Sukkot here in Parshas Pinchas, and it says, B'yom Shmini Atzeres tieh lechem kol melachas avodah lo tasu. On the 8th day is an Atzeres, right? That's where you get that idea of Shmini Atzeres. It says B'yom Shmini Atzeres. You should not do work on that day. And then it talks about the offerings. There it says you bring 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs, the he-goat for sin offering, and then its regular offerings, the meal offerings, the olah offerings, etc. So what's different between it and Sukkot is that where Sukkot, each one of the days went down, starting with 13 bulls, and by the last day, it's all down to 7, and there are 14 lambs each day. Shmini Atzeres has 1 of each, 1 bull and 1 ram. And here it's called Shmini Atzeres. It says its name explicitly. So there really is very little talked in the Torah itself about what the meaning of the holiday is. So let's first just explore the language of Shmini and Atzeres. First, we're going to deal with Atzeres, last things first. Atzeres means a stopping up. Meaning is, we've had this tremendous holiday season that starts from Rosh Hashanah, goes through Yom Kippur, and then we have Sukkah. This is the final day, a stopping point, where the holiday season ends. You could even say the holiday season really extends from the spring holiday of Passover, through Shavuos, the summer holiday, all the way through Shmini Atzeres, through Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, in between. And this is the ending. It's the ending of the time. Remember that in ancient days when we had a temple, everyone would go up to the temple for these 3 holidays of Passover, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And then we had this final little holiday, and this would cap the season. We start praying for rain on Shmini Atzeres. It's a special day for that, because the rainy season starts. And we don't have really regular holidays for 6 months. Now later we have these rabbinic holidays of Hanukkah and Purim for events that happen after biblical times. But this is the ending of the holiday season. So it's called Atzeres because it's the ending up. But another reason it's called Atzeres is from the root word otzer, which means a container. Again, this is also the harvest season. We know in Israel there's these tremendously delicious fruits like wheat and pomegranates and grapes and olives and figs, and everything is ready and so delicious and ready to go after the harvest. And the Atzeres is like we're putting everything in the storehouse to save for the winter to come. All the good stuff that we saved, we put our olives in our jars, it's all ready, Atzeres, it's all stored up. But on a spiritual level, remember that us Jews haven't really been living in Israel for 2,000 years until the founding of the state of Israel in 1948. Everything took on a more deep spiritual meaning. Now, that doesn't mean the spiritual meaning wasn't always there. It was. But it took on a special precedence because we didn't have access to the land and the agricultural cycle. So because of that, another meaning became more prevalent of what Atzeres means. The spiritual lights, all the growth that we made through the holiday season from Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur and Sukkot. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur with the liturgy and the singing and the awe and fear and tshuva, and the raw, unbridled joy of the water gathering of Sukkot, the shaking of the 4 species, and being in the Sukkah. It all culminates in this final day of Shmini Atzeres. It's an otzer, an Atzeres. It's a stopping up. It's a closing in of all these spiritual lights. The lights of the summer are ready to be gathered in to take us through the winter, just as the fruits of the summer are ready to be gathered in and take us through the winter. Now the word Shmini means 8th. And we know this from Hanukkah Torah as well. Why the level of 8 means the level beyond. We know the world was created in 7 days. There are 7 days of the week, cycles of 7. So 8th represents one beyond, represents a spiritual level beyond our comprehension. Past the 7, we start over again with the 1, meaning is at the end of the 7th day, Shabbos, we start back with the first day, but it also means we move beyond. Similarly, the holiday of Shavuos is the 50th. We have 7 weeks of 7. And after those 7 weeks of 7, we get to this sort of beyond, the 50th, the day of Shavuos. So too in the years, in the level of years, we have this level of the 50th, the Jubilee year, the Yovel. We have these 7 cycles of 7. Each year we have a regular year, and then a 7th year, like a Shabbos year, a sabbatical year, a Shemitah. And then after 7 cycles of 7, we get to this beyond level, the Jubilee year, a very special year that happens, where slaves are freed and land returned to their owners. So too, the level of 8 represents the one beyond. And Shmini Atzeres is like a level beyond. So what does it mean it's a level beyond? What's that all about? What's a level beyond? So there's a famous Gemara, and it's talking about what Shmini Atzeres says. And it says, Kasha li praschem. Your parting is difficult for me, so stay 1 extra day. We know the 70 bowls that we spoke about. When you add 13 plus 12 plus 11 all the way down to 9, for each one of the days of Sukkot, they add up to 70. Because the prayers of the Beis HaMikdash, the prayers of the temple, were for the whole world. And there were 70 bowls brought, one for the whole world. Any person could come and bring a sacrifice in the temple. You don't need to be Jewish. A lot of what we do as Jews is to serve the whole world. The message of Torah, ethical monotheism, really. And the light of God coming from Jerusalem. And that's what the holiday is all about. But we also have a special role to play as well as Jews. And that's what Shmini Atzeres is about. It's like after the big party in the temple of 7 days of rejoicing and Sukkah, just one more day, God says. Kashli praschan, it's difficult for me. Stay with me one more day. Just you and me. That's why it only has one bull and one ram. Whereas it has 13, 12, 11 for all the bulls going through Sukkot, and it has 14 rams. Here it just has one of each, meaning it's just us and God. Let's get rid of the Sukkah. We don't need it. Let's get rid of the Arba meaning. We don't need it. It's just oneness, closest connection, the deepest connection, spiritual light of connection, being alone in that space, the space of 8, beyond this world, beyond the physicality of Sukkot, to the spiritual world of Shmini Atzeres. Kashli prascham. Hashem says, you came here for Sukkot, you came here for Passover, you came here for Shavuos. You're about to go home. Everyone's going home, the party's over. Just me and you. It's the end of the party. Let's stay a little longer together. It's very similar to what we see, how there's 7 days of Sheva Brachas after a wedding. Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah is the engagement and the wedding. And then we have 7 days of Sheva Brachas, 7 days of rejoicing of the Sheva Brachas, which is Sukkot. And the 8th day is just, it's the place where God and us are just together. The beloved, the couple are together. Us and God. We're just together and we're rejoicing for everything good, all the wonderful things that happened during this season. And it just gives us that extra koach, that power to go on. So now I want to give over some very interesting Baal Shem Tov stories on the holidays. I'm really amazed every year when I look in the Sefer Baal Shem Tov and I see the Torahs there from the Baal Shem Tov on the holiday. So it says here for Shmini Atzeres, the Baal Shem Tov would not sit in the Sukkah. You're only supposed to sit in the Sukkah for 7 days. So why would you sit in the Sukkah? Well, it goes back to the question, why do us Jews in the diaspora keep 2 days of a holiday in general? And the idea is called a Sfeika de Yoma. We have a doubtful day. We're not exactly sure which day is the right day in the diaspora for the beginning of the holiday, so we keep 2 days. In Eretz Israel, they would know when they would sanctify the new moon exactly when the holidays would be. And they would send messengers out to the diaspora. But because it would take longer for some of these messages to get to the diaspora of when the new moon started, the Rosh Chodesh, they would keep 2 days of each holiday in order to be sure that they kept the holiday on the right day. Because a Rosh Chodesh could be either on the last day of the previous month or the first day of the new month. So because of that, there's always a doubt. The truth is, nowadays we have a set calendar, but we still kept the custom in the diaspora to keep 2 days for each holiday. So really, that's why we have the 2 days of Sukkot. By the time we get to the end of the holiday, Shmini Atzeres, it really could still be the last day of Sukkot, the last Shmini Atzeres. So the question is, should we sit in the Sukkah? So since we keep 2 days at the end, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, we know in Simchas Torah for sure not, if that's even the holiday at all, on that day we shouldn't sit in the Sukkah. But maybe on Shmini Atzeres in the diaspora, we should sit in the Sukkah. Because it might really be the day before, the 7th day of Sukkot. Again, because the Sfeika de Yoma, the doubt. So it says the Baal Shem Tov didn't sit in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. But it could be the 7th day of Sukkot, and maybe you're supposed to. Because of this, some people actually do sit in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. They don't say the bracha for the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, but they sit in there just in case you're supposed to sit in the Sukkah. Because that could be a doraisa. A Torah obligation, if there's a doubt, you should do it. But a rabbinic obligation, like saying a blessing, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't say a blessing. We shouldn't say God's name in vain. The Baal Shem Tov lived in the diaspora, though. Why would he not sit in the Sukkah? We should be sitting in the Sukkah because the Sfeika de Yoma, because maybe it's really the 7th day of Sukkot and not really Shmini Atzeres. So it says the Baal Shem Tov would not sit in the Sukkah. So I asked my Rebbe about what this means. And the tradition goes is that the Baal Shem Tov was in the Bechina of Eretz Israel. The Baal Shem Tov's level was so great. The spiritualization of Judaism had gotten so powerful at the time of the Baal Shem Tov that literally your thoughts had tremendous powers. The Kabbalah before him revealed that we can change worlds, build things, connect things through the power of our speech, our prayer. And the Baal Shem Tov exemplified this. As the last effort of the diaspora, the last most powerful movement, most important thing in the diaspora, the movement of Hasidism, the Hasidus of the Baal Shem Tov. He taught us that wherever our head is at is where we're at. If you're davening and you're thinking about the Kiddush afterwards, about eating, then you're really in that Kiddush. But you're in that Kiddush and you're thinking about God, you're really not in the Kiddush at all. You're really thinking about God. It's wherever your thoughts are at. He taught us how important the thoughts were. And the Baal Shem Tov wanted so desperately and tried so hard to get to the land of Israel that he became like Eretz Yisrael. As it says in the Holy Sfarim, that the holy tzaddikim, the holy rebbes, could build a Beis Hamikdash around themselves, a holy sanctuary. And while we're in the diaspora, if we're surrounded by the tzaddikim and we're learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, then it's like we're in Eretz Yisrael. It's like the Avir of Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Nachman says when you clap like this, some people get annoyed when they see Breslovers clapping like this. But the reason they're doing this is to bring in the level of Eretz Yisrael, bring in the air of Eretz Yisrael. So the Baal Shem Tov was the last, most important light before the Zionist movement. With the Zionist movement, everything turned around and went from the top of the head of the thought of the Baal Shem Tov to see that God's everywhere and that wherever our mind is at is where we're at, and went back down to the feet. And things turned around now. The whole body was sanctified. That now the feet, now that we should go into Eretz Yisrael physically. And the first person, the first Rebbe to really accomplish this in the most spiritual sense is Rabbi Nachman, the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, who actually physically made it into the land of Eretz Yisrael. And he changed the whole thing and created a spiritual path to return to Eretz Yisrael. But back to Shmini Atzeres, the holy Baal Shem Tov, the fact is he was like Eretz Yisrael. He was like Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, he didn't need to sit in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. Even kahalacha, if you're an Israeli and you're visiting Chutz La'aretz, you're visiting the diaspora, you don't need to sit in the Sukkah. You don't even need to celebrate. You don't need to sit in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, and you don't need to celebrate the last day, Simchas Torah, at all, because you're in the Bichin of Eretz Yisrael. Your mind is in Eretz Yisrael. Your heart is in Eretz Yisrael. And the Baal Shem Tov, even before we had finally made it back to the land of Israel, was already there in the land of Israel. It's amazing because there's so much level of spirituality, practically nevuah, the Baal Shem Tov had. Related to Sukkah, there's a similar story on the same page here in the Holy Sefer Baal Shem Tov, where he had opponents in his day, the Baal Shem Tov, believe it or not, someone as holy as him. He had opponents, and he taught us a lot about how to deal with these opponents. These opponents came to him during Sukkahs, and they said to him, your Sukkah is not kosher. And he argued with them, and he said, no, my Sukkah is kosher. And they said, no, it's not. And they gave him all the reasons in the world. So the Baal Shem Tov put his hand to his head, and he was consternated, and he thought like this. And they're like, what is he doing? And then when he opened his hand up, there was a note there. And the note said that the angel, Emtron, the Sarapanim, the most holy angel, this angel said on this note, the Baal Shem Tov Sukkah is kosher. And the fact that this happened just a few hundred years ago is mind-blowing. But for halachic purposes, it's also mind-blowing because we know already in the Gemara, I bring here the case of the oven of Aknai. Bring it from Chabad.org. It says, an oven, this is found in the Gemara in Bava Metzia, 59a and b. An oven that was cut into parts and sand was placed between the parts. Rabbi Eliezer maintained that it was pure, i.e. it could not become subject to ritual impurity, tumah. The rabbis said it was susceptible to tumah. On that day, Rabbi Eliezer brought them all sorts of proofs, intellectually, but they were rejected. This is what he said to them. If the law is as I say it, may this carob tree prove it. The carob tree was uprooted from its place a distance of 100 cubits. Others say 400 cubits. The rabbi said to him, we may not prove anything from a carob tree. Rabbi Eliezer said to them, if the law is as I said, may the aqueduct prove it. The water in the aqueduct began to flow backwards. They said to him, one cannot prove anything from an aqueduct. Said he to them, if the law is as I say, then may the walls of the house of study prove it. The walls of the house of study began to cave in. Rabbi Yeshua rebuked them. If Torah scholars are debating a point of Jewish law, why are your qualifications to intervene? Meaning he was arguing with the walls. The walls did not fall, listening to Rabbi Yeshua. But they did not straighten up either because Rabbi Eliezer had said they should fall. They still stand there today at a slant. He said, if the law is as I say, may it be proven from heaven, Rabbi Eliezer said. A heavenly voice came out and said, what do you want of Rabbi Eliezer? The Jewish law goes like him. Rabbi Yeshua stood on his feet and read the pasuk of the Torah. Torah lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is not in heaven. We do not paskin by baskol, by heavenly voice. Since God had already said in Torah, we follow the majority. Meaning is, Torah has an intellectual level. We don't follow by the laws of the prophets anymore. Already in the time, in the 2nd century, this was the situation. And yet the Baal Shem Tov said, I can follow a heavenly voice. The Baal Shem Tov was in the level of Eretz Yisrael, wherever he went. But again, that just was the beginning, the start, the spiritual start of returning to the land of Israel. A fascinating story, which a lot of people aren't going to like. They're going to be upset by it. And this is probably one of the reasons why he had such opposition in his lifetime. But unlike most people who basically get angry and attack the people who oppose them, the Baal Shem Tov had a more magnanimous way, a deeper understanding of why people should oppose them. There's a story of the Baal Shem Tov where after he was leaving a town, he was there for Shabbos, he used to travel around, people in the town were throwing rocks at him. And they were chasing him out of the town. And he turned around and faced them. And the look of holy awe, the awe of God, was in his eyes. And they were so scared when they saw the fire coming from him that they dropped their rocks and ran. The humble Baal Shem Tov ran after them, picking up the rocks, cupping them in his hand, and said, "You forgot your holy rocks. You forgot your holy rocks." Personally, my opinion is you should never tell the moral of a Hasidic story. And if you were here with me today and I was teaching this story, I would maybe talk it out and ask you, what do you think the meaning of that story is? But since this is meant for a wider audience, and there's no guarantee that any of you understand that story, this is what I believe it means. The Baal Shem Tov realized that even those who are our enemies, most of them really believe what they're doing is right. Those people who opposed the Baal Shem Tov were because they believed their version of Judaism was right. They believed as much that their Judaism was right as the Baal Shem Tov believed his Judaism was right. And therefore, he saw what they were doing as holy. Their opposition was holy. Maybe it wasn't so nice to throw rocks, but the intentions that they should oppose him because they loved Judaism and they clung to their Judaism so strong, he believed that was holy. And that's why he said, take your holy rocks, take your holy rocks. If that's how we see opposition, we're in a very good place. I'm now going to read to you a Torah that I wrote about Shmini Atzeres. The level of 8, as is known, is one beyond what we know. It's like you get to have this festival with the king, Sukkah, for a week. And then he says, Kashali Praschem. Hey, all of us were together for so long, it was so sweet. But now I'm going to invite you personally, just me and you, to have an extra day to spend with me, the king. And it's going to be the highest day ever. Simchas Torah. We're going to dance, we're going to sing, we're going to have festive meals. And the whole thing is just about our relationship. Our relationship to Hashem is all about the Torah. That's why we have Simchas Torah as part of Shmini Atzeres. It's all about dancing with the Torah, this gift of light, this gift of the teaching, the way to connect to our Creator. We're going to dance so much and rejoice over this Torah. It's speech, it's vision, it's ideas, it's how we relate, how we communicate and know our Creator. Most of the year, we didn't invite God to all the things that we did. We thought we were separate from God, Has v'Sholom, and we went about our own ways. We davened, and we learned, but how often did we really have God in mind? But in his great mercy and understanding, the king actually came down to visit us, as it says in Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah, that God comes down to the field to be with us. And now we suddenly became more aware during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur of God's presence in our lives. He was always there. I mean, we were married after all. But now we started thinking about our relationship, our marriage more, and we started taking the commitment more seriously. He sent us special messages, and we were so thankful. As we're getting closer and closer, though, we remembered our indiscretions, and we hesitated and evaluated the situation. But we let God know on Rosh Hashanah we wanted to have that relationship. We made God king. We realized, God, it's just all about me and you. And God judged us too. He thought about us. How did we behave on Rosh Hashanah? But his love was so awesome and complete that by Yom Kippur, we just were back together, totally united. And any distance that we had was just pure love. We admitted we were wrong on Yom Kippur. We did the all chaitz, but then we were married again fully, completely, and we rejoiced for 7 days in the Sukkah of celebrations, of parties, of happiness, that we're back with the King. We build this beautiful house, the house of the Sukkah. It's patterned those moments of togetherness. And we had that week of Sheva Brachas, of the 7 days of blessing. And then we got to know each other again for real, out of happiness, because relationships are best when they're in happiness. And we strengthened the bond so firmly, and we got wings to fly with. But in any relationship, there's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. And we know the winter is going to be harsh. There's not going to be as many holidays. It's going to be cold. It's going to be dark. So let's have one special day with us and God, a day of rejoicing, Simchas Torah and Shmini Atzeres, which again is 2 days here in the diaspora. And God says, Kashli praschem, it's so difficult for us to part. Let's just spend these days together and singing and dancing and rejoicing, just us together. So we know on Simchas Torah, we take out the Sifrei Torah and we dance around and do hakafos. We also finish reading the Torah, which we've been reading all year, and with the last parsha of the Torah. We read that and we finish up, and everyone in the shul, from the oldest to the youngest, gets an aliyah on that day. And then we start over again and we start reading Breshis, because the Torah is a cycle of light, a cycle of life. So therefore we finish the Torah and we immediately start again with reading the Torah. And that's why we're happy that we have this Torah, that we're happy that we have this relationship with God. So that's why we do Simchas Torah. The actual festivities of how we do it today actually developed in the 16th century. And a lot of it, like most of our festivities, was strongly based on the Kabbalistic ceremonies of the Arizal and his circle. But the idea of Shmini Atzeres and this connection and the finishing of the Torah goes farther back, much farther back. This concludes my spiritual thoughts on the idea of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, a day where we get to spend our time with God alone, not with the accoutrements of the Sukkah or the Arba Minim, not with matzahs, not with the shofar, no fasting, just a day of togetherness with God. And over the years, we have combined that with the holiday of Simchas Torah, where we celebrate the special medium of relationship with God, the Holy Torah, which is unique just for us, to feel the connection of God, and we have the Torah throughout the whole year. And that's why we end the holiday season with finishing the Torah and starting again. Because even though we're not going to have the holidays till Passover time 6 months from now, nevertheless, we always have the Torah. And the best Torah portions are starting up. Who doesn't love the stories of Breshis, of the forefathers and foremothers, and the stories of Shmos, Exodus? These are the parshas we read during the winter, and what great enjoyment we get from them. And the rabbis, of their great love for us, gave us these amazing holidays of Hanukkah and Purim after the miracles of the winter. But let's not get ahead of ourselves too much. Anyway, everyone should have a wonderful Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. If you're watching this right now, you're actually probably on the holiday of Hoshana Raba, which is also a very special holiday in itself, the end of Sukkah, where we beat the Aravos. We get these willows and we smash them down, showing that we're destroying the last of the judgments that were left over from Rosh Hashanah. And we do the hakafos many, many, many times around the bima on Hoshana Raba, a long davening. And that precedes the very special holiday of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. So I hope you enjoyed the learning today as much as I enjoyed giving over to you. This is Adam Law with Wanderings with Adam Law. Have a great holiday. Hag Sameach. Bye-bye.